We are on chapter 10. The last thing that we read on chapter 9 was Fritz and Gerda were walking together, and Fritz told her that there is a file on her as well. So we learned about those files that the police had on them. So, chapter 10. To my surprise, Anna was at school that day, but her eyes were red and she made a point of keeping herself apart from everyone. I tried to talk with her at lunch, but she asked me to go away. When I looked back, she was crying again. Inside, I felt just as awful, but for more reasons than I could count. It broke my heart to look at Anna and know how she must be collapsing inside. The other kids whispered about her until I threatened them. Even if it cost me a detention to protect her, I would follow through on my threats if necessary. Besides, what did I care? The Stasi already had a file on me. What did it matter if disorderly conduct in school was added to the list of my supposed crimes? Other than the threats to Anna's gossipers, I spent every free minute of that day reviewing details of my life that might somehow qualify for a file. What had I done? Every time we walked home, my eyes did inevitably wander to the wall in the west. The Grenzer had used his rifle to warn me of the consequences for that. But what is a crime to see what the rest of East Berlin so effectively ignored? I was a member of the Pioneers, but not as enthusiastic one. I wore the uniform when it was required, but mine was never as crisp or smooth as the other kids, nor did I want it to be. That was it, then wrinkled clothes, my secret rebellion. Then at night, when we listened to Beatles music, Fritz spoke of his frustration with our lives, and I always joined in. Often it was just jokes about the daily inconveniences of living in such a closed off world, and the way the government paraded its few successes around like fine art hung in a crumbling room. Sometimes we weren't joking, though. Sometimes we genuinely resented the life we were forced into. I could admit that. But was it a crime to feel that way? Everyone complained now and then. Surely I had done nothing all that wrong. In fact, the only crime I could be sure of having committed was having been born the daughter of Eldisloe. If Papa had once created trouble for the government, then apparently that was enough to convict me as well. For my file proved there had been a trial of my loyalty to the GDR, and at 12 years old, I was already found guilty. After school, Anna left so quickly that I wondered if she had somehow snuck out early. So I gathered my books and coat and flew out the door behind her. I caught up to her as she hurried along the sidewalk, marching home as if the devil were at her back, with her head down and shoulders slumped over. Even from here, I felt the pain she was experiencing as real as if I could touch it. Seeing her ache made me hurt too. I couldn't help but think of what I'd be doing if Fritz had not returned home last night either. I'm so sorry, Anna, I said. It must. Don't you dare apologize. She swerved on me with a rage I'd never seen in her. Her eyes blazed and her mouth was curled in an angry snarl. Your family knew what Peter was going to do. Why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you tell me? I stepped back, caught off guard by her words. He'd already left when I found out, I stammered. And he didn't want you to know because he didn't want you to be in trouble afterwards. Well, we are. And you could have at least warned us, she said. My parents told us to stay away from you and your family. They knew how you are. But Peter and I always insisted that you were good people, that you didn't cause problems like your father did. We were wrong. You're just as bad as he was. Don't speak about my father, I snapped. If Peter tried to leave, that was his doing and no one else's. My father had nothing to do with that, and neither did anyone else in my family. She stiffened as if I had slapped her. They told us people would lie about their involvement to save themselves. Peter broke the law when he left, Gerda, just as your father did when he left. You ought to be ashamed of him, just as I have been ashamed of Peter now. My father loves Germany, and he hates what's happened to us. I'm not ashamed to feel the same way. Why are you listening to the Stasi? I have to. Tears filled her eyes. They could take my parents away for this, Gerda, throw them in prison or worse. What would happen to me then? I wanted to hug her and take the pain away, but I only stood there feeling useless yet again. No, the state hadn't taken my father, but they were certainly the reason he couldn't come home. At least I still had my mother. No matter what, I would always help you, I said. The state can't take away our friendship. Yes, they can. Anna bit on her lip a moment before she continued. To stay out of prison, we must prove our loyalty, and your family is, well, your father anyway. Gerda, we can't be friends anymore. And she ran off down the street on a road that led the long way to her home. That's how eager she was to get away from me. I felt like a disease. Just as my father had infected me, I could now infect others. But with what? Courage to speak out, to act, to think and question and believe what I wanted to believe? Somehow I lived in a world where these were bad things. A little way farther down the road, I happened to look up to the platform in the west. And although he had not been there this morning, my father was there now. He stood up straight, as if he had been waiting for a while, knowing I would eventually pass by. When he saw he had my attention, he started into his dance again, and then went back to the motions of shoveling. I turned away from him down another street on a road that was the long way to my home, too, away from the disease. Answer the question on Google Classroom.